The manor's bedroom echoed with the crack of the braided leather whip, tearing through the humid Mississippi night air. Eleanor fell to her knees on the dark wood floorboards, her white dress torn at the back, revealing red welts that bled slowly. Master Clayton, her husband, stood with his chest heaving and his face twisted in fury. He raised his arm for another strike. "You ungrateful whore," he snarled, spitting the words like venom. "How dare you question my orders in front of the overseers? You are mine, and mine alone." 2 days earlier, Eleanor had pleaded with him to spare a slave girl from a fatal whipping for stealing food, but Clayton had humiliated her publicly, accusing her of weakness and treason to the family's legacy. Now, each welt was the price of her audacity. The leather hissed through the air again. Eleanor felt the flesh split on her back, hot blood running down her spine. Her vision blurred. Tears burned in her swollen eyes. "You never learned your place, woman," Clayton continued, his voice soaked in whiskey and rage. "I gave you a name, a house, a position, and you repay me with disobedience." Eleanor slowly lifted her face. Her eyes blazed with hatred for the first time in 12 years of a forced marriage. "You will pay for this, Clayton," she murmured, her voice hoarse but firm. "Not with words, but with what you fear most, losing everything." He laughed, a dry, cruel cackle. "Threats from a broken woman? You have nothing, Eleanor. Without me, you are nothing." But what Clayton didn't see was the vial hidden in the folds of her torn skirt, the clear liquid inside, extracted from water hemlock roots gathered in secret from the edge of the swamp. Mama Bea, the old root doctor who had taught her the secrets of the plants, had whispered the instructions a week before. 3 drops in his whiskey, Mistress. The body turns hard as stone, but the mind stays awake. He'll feel everything, see everything, but he won't be able to do a thing. And Eleanor tightened her fingers on the vial. The glass was warm against her cold skin. "Go to sleep soon, Clayton," she said, still on her knees. "Tomorrow, you will wake without a voice, without movement, a prisoner in your own body." He kicked her in the ribs. Eleanor rolled on the floor, stifling a scream. "Mad woman," he spat. "Tomorrow I'll finish what I started today. You will learn to respect me, or you will die trying." Clayton stormed out, slamming the door. His heavy footsteps echoed down the hall to the main parlor, where he always drank before sleeping. Eleanor lay motionless on the floor for long minutes. The blood formed a dark pool beneath her. The pain throbbed in waves, but something stronger burned within. It wasn't just anger, it was a promise. She dragged herself to the cracked mirror on the wall. The reflection showed an unrecognizable face, swollen, bruised, scarred. But the eyes shone with a new light. Determination, vengeance. "He will awaken without a body," she whispered to herself, "and I will make him what he made me, nothing." Out in the quarters, the slaves heard the screams and huddled on their straw pallets. They knew that sound well. The mistress getting a beating from the master, another night of horror on the Clayton plantation. But what no one knew, Eleanor, was that this would be the last night Master Clayton would sleep as an absolute lord, because Eleanor had already decided. And when a woman decides, nothing in the world can make her turn back. In the year 1855, the Mississippi Delta pulsed with the oppressive rhythm of the cotton gins. Slavery still reigned absolute, despite the abolitionist winds that had begun to blow from the north. The Clayton plantation was a microcosm of colonial brutality. Slave cabins of rough-hewn wood, stifling in the equatorial heat, fields of cotton that stretched to the horizon, hazy with the constant humidity of the South. The big house stood like a palace of hypocrisy. Imported furniture decorated the parlors, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings, lavish parties masked the misery that happened just a few yards away. In the quarters where more than 80 enslaved people lived crowded together like cattle. The routine was a brutal cycle that repeated every day. The slaves awoke before sunrise to the sound of the bell calling them to the fields. They followed one another to the cotton fields in a single file line, watched by overseers armed with whips and rifles. They picked cotton until their bones ached. They carried bales that weighed more than their own bodies. In the evening, the distribution of food, boiled yams, cornmeal mush, sometimes a piece of rancid salt pork. The portions were measured with cruel precision. enough to keep from starving, but never enough to have strength to spare. The nights echoed with groans of pain. Exhausted bodies dragged themselves to the straw pallets. Mothers rocked children who cried from hunger. Old men coughed up blood in the dark corners. And always, there was the fear of the next day. Because on the Clayton plantation, any mistake was punished. A wrong look, a misplaced word, a stumble in the work. Everything was a reason for the whipping post, for the lash, for the brands of hot iron. Jeremiah was only 15 when he dropped a bucket of water. Master Clayton ordered 50 lashes. The boy did not survive. He died tied to the post, his blood forming puddles on the red earth. He was buried in a shallow grave at the back of the plantation, without a name, without a cross, without permitted tears. He was just a boy, a voice whispered in the quarters that night. Mama Bay, the African healer of nearly 70 years, held that silence like a sharpened blade. The Lord collects his debts, child. It may take time, but he collects. Eleanor Vance was the mistress of the Clayton plantation. She was 32, fair skin inherited from her English grandparents, curly black hair that fell to her waist, brown eyes that had seen too much for her age, tall, erect, with the posture of one raised to command, but with a heart that never grew accustomed to cruelty. She had married Clayton 12 years before, not for love, for family obligation. Her first husband, a distant cousin of Clayton's, had died of yellow fever, leaving her a wealthy widow in land but alone in a world that did not forgive women without masculine protection. The family arranged the marriage. Clayton needed the lands. Eleanor needed a name to protect her. It was a transaction, cold, calculated, like everything in that world. In the first years, Clayton still feigned some civility, but as power went to his head, the mask fell. He drank more and more. He beat her more frequently, humiliated her publicly. And Eleanor learned to survive. She managed the kitchen and the house slaves. She coordinated the meals for the big house. She supervised the laundry, the cleaning, the preparations for parties. She was an efficient administrator, but with a crucial difference from other masters. Eleanor treated the slaves as people, not with excessive kindness, that would be hypocrisy in such a cruel system, but with a minimal dignity that other masters never considered. She learned their names, asked about their children. She did not whip without cause. And that's how she met Mama Bia, the African healer who saved her life during a violent fever when Clayton was traveling, and no white doctor would attend a woman without her husband present. The plants know the secrets, Mistress, Bee would say, preparing bitter teas in the kitchen of the big house. They heal, but they also kill. It all depends on the dose and the intention. Eleanor spent months learning, studying the leaves, the roots, the seeds. She discovered that water hemlock, if improperly prepared, could paralyze a man without killing him immediately. That castor beans in excess caused terrible convulsions. That certain herbs combined produced devastating effects, invisible to the eyes of the doctors of the time. "Why are you teaching me this?" Eleanor asked on a stuffy afternoon. Bee looked into her eyes, old tired eyes, but still bright. "Because one day you'll need it. A woman trapped in a cruel man's house always needs a weapon, and a plant is the best weapon, because no one suspects it." Eleanor also had other secret bonds. Samuel and Elijah, two field hands, strong men, in their 30s. Samuel was tall, broad-shouldered, with whip scars on his back that told stories of resistance. Elijah was shorter, but quick, intelligent, with eyes that shone whenever he saw Eleanor pass. They protected her in the shadows, when Clayton drank too much and became violent. It was Samuel who would discreetly appear in the kitchen, pretending to fetch water, but actually ensuring the mistress wouldn't be killed that night. When overseers looked at Eleanor with malice, it was Elijah who would place himself in the way, creating distractions. And Eleanor, it loved them both in silence. An impossible love, forbidden, but as real as the blood that flowed in her veins. "Mistress, will you ever be free?" Samuel asked one night when she went down to the quarters to bring medicine to a sick child. Eleanor fell silent. "Free? A married woman is not free, Samuel. I am his property, just as you are my property. But you're different." "No, I'm not. I'm just tired." Elijah approached. "If one day you need us, We'll be here." Eleanor looked at them both. At that moment, she understood she was not alone, that there were people willing to risk everything for her, just as she was beginning to consider risking everything for them. The antagonists of the plantation were well defined. Master Whip Clayton commanded everything. 45 years old, a thick beard, eyes as cold as steel. He drank whiskey from breakfast on. He slept with young slave girls to assert his dominance. He whipped for pleasure. Beside him, 2 loyal overseers. Jedediah Embers was a brute who burned the feet of runaway slaves with a hot iron. He said it was an effective method, that no one ran away twice after smelling their own flesh burning. Silas Tooth was even worse, a sadist. He pulled out the teeth of slaves who dared to smile during punishments. He kept the teeth in a leather pouch, like war trophies. "Smiling is for free, folks," he used to say. "A slave has no reason to smile." Hey, one morning, Clayton ordered an 8-month pregnant slave to be whipped. She had been slow in delivering her cotton quota, only a few minutes late. But lateness was disobedience. Eleanor was on the veranda when she saw the scene. The woman tied to the post, her enormous belly protruding, the whip cutting the air. "Clayton, no!" she screamed, running down the steps. "She's with child." He stopped, turned around slowly. So, you'll kill the child. The child is mine. I do what I want with what is mine." Eleanor was paralyzed. The words were so natural to him, so obvious, as if it were impossible to see it any other way. The whip cracked again, once, twice, 3 times. At the 10th lash, the woman collapsed. Blood ran down her legs. The child was born dead right there, in the middle of the yard, at the foot of the whipping post. Clayton laughed. Now she can work without that weight on her back. "Be thankful, slave." Eleanor vomited on the grass. She ran up to her room. She locked herself in for 2 days, and when she came out, something had changed in her forever. Weeks later, an elderly slave was accused of stealing flour. He denied it, swore it wasn't him. But it didn't matter. Accusation was the same as conviction. Clayton ordered a public hanging. He wanted everyone to see, for everyone to learn. He forced Eleanor to watch. "You need to toughen up, woman. You need to learn this isn't charity. It's business." The old man was hanged slowly. The rope was too thin. He died suffocating. It took almost 10 minutes. His eyes bulged from their sockets. His tongue turned purple. Clayton leaned close to Eleanor, whispered in her ear, "This is what happens to the weak, mistress. Remember that." It was that afternoon that Eleanor sought out Mama Bia. "Teach me everything, everything you know about plants that kill." The old healer studied her face. She saw the change. "Are you sure, mistress?" "Absolutely." "Then, let's begin. Because when you decide to kill, you have to do it right. Otherwise, we're the ones who die." The lessons began that same week. Eleanor learned during the afternoons when Clayton was in the cotton fields or drunk in the hammock on the veranda. She memorized doses, tested combinations on small animals, observed the effects, and she planned, in detail, coldly, like a strategist preparing for a war. Because this wasn't just personal revenge, it was a declaration of war against everything that system represented. A trapped woman, tortured slaves, disposable lives. Eleanor looked out her bedroom window. Down below, in the quarters, Samuel and Elijah worked under the scorching Sunday sweat dripping, muscles tense. And she thought, "You will be free. I promise, even if it costs me everything." The Clayton plantation breathed tension. The slaves felt that something was changing. The mistress was different, more distant, more dangerous. And Clayton, drunk on power, saw nothing, because men like him never see what they don't want to see, until it's too late. The party in the big house had ended 2 hours ago. The guests, neighboring planters, a corrupt preacher, 2 fat ladies who laughed too loudly, had already departed in their carriages. The parlor smelled of spilled wine and extinguished cigars. Clayton was completely drunk. Eleanor was cleaning the crystal glasses in the kitchen. Her hands trembled slightly. She knew nights like this always ended badly. A drunk Clayton was predictable and dangerous. "Eleanor," his voice boomed down the hallway, heavy, slurred, full of ill-contained anger. She took a deep breath, wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm here, Clayton." He appeared in the kitchen doorway, shirt unbuttoned, hair disheveled, red eyes. He held the braided leather whip in his right hand, the one he used only for the most severe punishments. "You humiliated me today," he said, slurring his words. Eleanor's stomach churned. "What do you mean?" "That slave, Sarah. You asked me not to punish her in front of the guests. Made me look weak." It was true. During dinner, Sarah had dropped a porcelain platter. Clayton had risen in a fury, ready to whip her right there in the middle of the parlor. Eleanor had touched his arm, just a touch, and whispered, "Not here, the guests." He had agreed at the time, but he held on to the offense. Let it fester along with the whiskey. "Clayton, I only—" "Shut up!" He lunged, grabbed her hair, pulled hard. Eleanor screamed. He dragged her down the hall to the bedroom, threw her on the floor, locked the door. "You think you run this house? You think you have the right to question me? That's not what I—" The first strike of the whip cut the air. Eleanor tried to roll aside. Too late. The leather hit her back. The pain exploded like fire. She screamed. Quiet. Slaves scream. A mistress takes it in silence. Higher. The second blow. The third. The fourth. Eleanor stopped counting. The pain merged into a continuous mass of agony. The dress tore. The blood began to flow. "You are mine," Clayton shouted between blows. "My property, just like everyone else on this plantation." Eleanor fell to her knees. Her hands gripped the floor. Her nails scratched the wood. She tried not to scream, but her body wouldn't obey. "Beg for forgiveness," he ordered. Silence. Eleanor gritted her teeth. She wasn't going to beg. Not anymore. Another blow. Harder. Blood spattered on the wall. "Beg? Never," she whispered. Clayton stopped. For a moment, he just stared. Then he kicked her ribs. Eleanor rolled on the floor. She choked back a scream. "You'll learn," he said, calmer now, the anger turning to coldness. "Tomorrow I'll finish, and you will beg, you will crawl, you will call me master." He left, slammed the door. The key turned in the lock. Eleanor lay motionless, lying in her own blood. The pain throbbed in waves. Every breath was torture. But what hurt more was the humiliation, the helplessness. 12 years of marriage summarized in that moment. She was a wife, a mistress, a white woman of position, but there on that floor, she was no different from the slave women Clayton raped in the quarters. Just another piece of property. Just another body he could break whenever he pleased. The tears came, silent, hot, mixed with the blood. "Is Mama going to save me?" she whispered into the void. A child's question, without an answer. But then, the answer came from within. Not from her mother, dead for 20 years. From herself. "Yes, I will. I'll save myself by dragging him to hell." Eleanor crawled to the window, pushed open the glass pane. The night air came in, cold. Down below, the slave quarters were dark. But she knew no one was sleeping. They had all heard the screams. She pulled the vial from her torn skirt. The glass was intact. The poison was safe. "Not tomorrow," she whispered. "Tonight." But her body wouldn't obey. Her legs trembled too much. Her vision blurred. Eleanor collapsed at the edge of the window. She closed her eyes. When she woke, it was the dead of night. Someone was tapping at the window, softly, insistently. She dragged herself over, looked out. Samuel, climbing the wall, as agile as a cat. "Mistress," he whispered, climbing through the window. "I heard everything." Elijah appeared behind him. They both entered the room. They looked at her back. The dried blood, the purple welts. "He did this," Elijah began, but his voice failed him. Eleanor looked at them both. She saw rage in their eyes. True rage, not the explosive rage of Clayton, but the cold, calculated, deadly kind. "You can't do anything," she said. "If you kill him, they'll kill you too." "And if the mistress kills him?" Samuel asked. Silence. "They won't just kill her," he continued. "They'll have a trial. They might even acquit. A white woman kills a violent husband. Sometimes they forgive that." Eleanor sat on the bed. The pain was unbearable, but her mind was clear, crystal clear, for the first time in 12 years. "I don't want a trial. I don't want forgiveness. I want justice." "What kind of justice?" Elijah asked. She looked at them both, took a deep breath, and told them the plan. The poison that paralyzed the body but left the mind awake. The 3 drops in the whiskey, the wait until the effect took hold, and then the final humiliation. Clayton would see everything, feel everything, but he would be powerless to do anything. The mistress wants us to... Samuel couldn't finish the sentence. I want you to love me in front of him. I want him to see that he was never the owner of anything. Not of me, not of you, not of this plantation. Elijah swallowed hard. That's madness, Eleanor completed. Yes, but do you have a better idea? Samuel came closer, touched her face, gently, as if touching porcelain. We always knew you were different, mistress, but this is war, and war is exactly what I want. The 3 were silent, listening to the plantation breathe outside, the crickets chirping, the wind in the leaves, everything so normal, so calm. But inside, in that blood-stained room, something had changed forever. When? Asked Elijah. Tomorrow night. He always drinks whiskey after dinner, alone in the parlor. It's the perfect moment. Samuel shook his head. And after? We run? After, we decide. But first, justice. The 2 left through the window, as silent as shadows. Eleanor was alone again, but she didn't feel alone. She felt powerful. In the morning, Clayton appeared in the room. He brought coffee and bread, as if nothing had happened. Good morning, he said almost gently. Eleanor was lying on her stomach. She didn't answer. I went too far yesterday, he continued. It wasn't an apology. It was just a statement. But you provoked me. I hope you've learned your lesson. She turned her face, looked at him, smiled. A weak but sincere smile. I did learn, Clayton. I learned a lot. He seemed satisfied. Good. Then tonight we'll dine together. As husband and wife. As husband and wife, she repeated. When he left, Eleanor got up. Every movement was agony, but she went to the mirror, looked at her back. The welts were purple. Some were still bleeding. She touched one of them, felt the pain shoot through her entire body. This, she whispered, is the last time you will ever mark me. She went down to the kitchen. Mama Bay was preparing lunch. She looked at Eleanor, saw the marks on her neck, on her arms. She understood everything without needing to ask. Is it time? The old woman whispered. It is time. Bea nodded, went to the back of the pantry, returned with a small vial, liquid as clear as water, 3 drops in his whiskey. No more, no less, and wait half an hour. His body will lock up slowly. First the legs, then the arms, last, the voice. But his eyes will stay open, seeing everything. Eleanor took the vial, hid it in her pocket. How long will he be like this? Depends on the man. Could be hours, could be days, but in the end, the heart stops. No pain, just silence. Thank you, Mama. The old woman grabbed her arm, squeezed it hard. Don't thank me, child, because after this, you'll never be the same. Killing changes a person, forever. Eleanor looked into her eyes. I've already changed. Last night, when he beat me until I bled, I died. What's left now is just vengeance. The day passed slowly. Eleanor prepared dinner herself. Roast chicken, black-eyed peas, cornbread, everything just as Clayton liked it. He ate with satisfaction, spoke of business, of the cotton harvest, of a slave who needed to be sold for rebelliousness. Eleanor just listened, nodded when necessary, smiled at the right moments. After dinner, Clayton went to the parlor. As always, Eleanor served the whiskey, dark, full-bodied, and when he wasn't looking, 3 drops from the vial, exactly 3. Clayton took the first sip. This is good tonight. It's the best we had, Eleanor said. He drank more and more, finished the glass, asked for another. Eleanor served it. Without poison this time, it wasn't needed. 30 minutes, she counted mentally. 29, 28. Clayton began to complain. My legs feel heavy. It must be fatigue. 20 minutes. He tried to stand up. He couldn't. Eleanor, what? 15 minutes. His arms fell limp. What have you done? What have you done? 10 minutes. His voice failed, became a whisper. 5 minutes. Complete silence. Clayton was paralyzed in the armchair, his eyes open, terrified, his mouth slightly ajar, trying to scream, but no sound came out. Eleanor approached, knelt in front of him, looked into his eyes. "This," she whispered, "is for what you did to me, to the slaves, to all of us." A tear rolled down Clayton's face, silent, powerless. "Now, you will see what it's like to have no voice, what it's like to be property, what it's like to be nothing." She stood up, went to the door, opened it. Samuel and Elijah entered. They looked at Clayton. They understood. And so began the longest night of the life of Master Whip Clayton, the night he lost everything. Samuel and Elijah entered the parlor slowly. Their bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. They looked at Clayton, motionless in the armchair. The master's eyes darted frantically, the only part of his body that still obeyed. "Is he seeing everything?" Elijah asked. "Everything," Eleanor answered. "But he can't do anything, can't scream, can't move. Just watch." Samuel approached, stood in front of Clayton, looked into his eyes. He saw the panic, the desperation, and something else, recognition. Clayton knew exactly what was about to happen. "Remember me, Master," Samuel said, his voice low but firm. "I'm the slave you had whipped because I looked at the Mistress. 50 lashes. I couldn't lie on my back for a week." Clayton tried to move his head. "Impossible. Now, I'm going to do what you were always afraid a slave would do." Eleanor was leaning against the wall, watching. Her heart beat fast. Not with fear, with anticipation, with a strange freedom she had never felt before. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Elijah turned to her. "We've spent our whole lives being property. Tonight, we're gonna be men, real men." Eleanor nodded. She began to unbutton her dress. Slowly, each button a decision, a breaking of everything she had been taught to believe. The dress fell to the floor. She was left in only her white chemise, stained with blood on the back. "Come," she said, holding out her hand to Samuel. He hesitated. For a second it seemed he would back away. But then he looked at Clayton. He saw the hatred in his eyes, and he decided. Samuel took Eleanor's hand, pulled her close. He kissed her, a long, deep kiss, full of years of repressed desire. Clayton tried to scream. His mouth opened a millimeter. No sound came out. Eleanor led Samuel to the red velvet divan, the same divan where Clayton used to sleep after drinking. She lay down slowly. Samuel knelt beside her. His hands were trembling. "You can touch me," she whispered. "Tonight, there is no master, no slave, only us." Samuel's hands roamed her body, slowly, with reverence, as if touching something sacred. Eleanor closed her eyes, let herself feel. Every touch was an act of vengeance, every moan, a declaration of war. Elijah approached, sat on the arm of the divan, touched Eleanor's hair. She opened her eyes, looked at him. "You too," she said. "Mistress, don't call me that. Tonight my name is Eleanor, just Eleanor." Elijah kissed her, while Samuel moved down her body, 3 bodies entwined, sweat, heavy breathing, and there, just a few feet away, Clayton watched, paralyzed, powerless, his eyes wide with horror. Eleanor turned her face to him, looked into his eyes, smiled, a smile of pure cruelty. "Were you born to possess me, Clayton?" she said between heavy breaths. "Well, I was born to destroy you, the same way you destroyed lives. See what it is to be nothing." Samuel entered her. Eleanor arched her back, moaned loudly, not in pain like on the nights with Clayton, in pleasure, real, true. "This," she cried out, "this is what you could never give me." Elijah kissed her neck. His hands squeezed her breasts. The 3 moved in sync, a ritual of liberation, of vengeance, of profane justice. Clayton was crying. Tears streamed silently down his paralyzed face. He saw his wife being loved by 2 slaves. He saw his power being destroyed before his very eyes, and he could do nothing, absolutely nothing. "Cry, Clayton," Eleanor whispered. "Cry like the mothers cried when you sold their children. Cry like Sarah cried when you killed the child in her womb." The night wore on. Eleanor gave herself to the 2 men, alternating between them. First Samuel, then Elijah, then both together. Each act was bolder than the last, more explicit, more brutal in the message it sent. Is he suffering? Elijah asked at some point. More than if we had peeled the skin from his body, Eleanor replied. When dawn broke, the three were exhausted. Lying on the parlor floor, Eleanor in the middle, Samuel and Elijah on either side, naked, sweaty, free. Clayton was still in the armchair, his eyes still open, but something had changed. It was no longer just panic. It was acceptance, as if he had finally understood that he had lost everything, forever. Eleanor stood up, put on her chemise, approached him. Still awake, Clayton? Can you still hear me? A slow blink. Yes. Good, because now comes the best part. She left the parlor, returned minutes later with Mama Bay. The old healer looked at Clayton, shook her head. This man carries death in his eyes, she said. How much time does he have left? Eleanor asked. A few hours, maybe less. His heart is fighting, but it will lose. Eleanor nodded. Then let's use these hours well. Mama B touched Clayton's forehead, felt the cold skin. Master Clayton, she said solemnly, you whipped my grandson to death. He was 13 years old. Do you remember? Clayton blinked. He remembered. Then receive the curse of those who died by your hand. May your soul never find peace. May you wander forever between worlds, lost, alone, suffering. She spat in his face. The spittle ran slowly down his cheek. Clayton couldn't wipe it away. Samuel got dressed. What about the overseers? Eleanor looked out the window. The day was breaking. Soon Jedediah Embers and Silas Tooth would come to the big house to receive the day's orders. We need to act fast, she said. The plan was simple. When Jedediah Embers arrived, Eleanor met him on the veranda, alone, smiling. Good morning, Jedediah. The master wants to speak with you. He's in the parlor. Jedediah entered, suspicious. He was a big man, strong, accustomed to violence. But he didn't expect what he saw. Clayton paralyzed in the armchair, Samuel and Elijah on either side, armed with kitchen knives. What the... Jedediah began. Samuel was fast, very fast. The knife went into Jedediah's back, between the ribs, straight into the lung. Jedediah fell to his knees, tried to scream. Blood came out of his mouth. Remember when you burned my feet? Samuel said, crouching in front of him. Said I would never run again. Well, I didn't run, Jedediah. I stayed, and I waited. Elijah grabbed the cattle branding iron, put it in the fireplace, waited for it to glow red. This here, he said, holding the hot iron, is for every foot you burned. He pressed the iron to Jedediah's face. The smell of burning flesh filled the parlor. Jedediah tried to scream, but his punctured lung wouldn't let him. He died in silence, just like the slaves he had tortured for years. Silas Tooth was harder. He was clever, suspicious. When he arrived and saw that Jedediah hadn't returned, he hesitated. Eleanor had to improvise. She went out onto the veranda, feigned a faint. Help Silas, the master. He's taken ill. Silas ran. He came through the front door. He didn't see Elijah hidden behind it. The blow to his head was heavy. Silas collapsed. When he awoke, he was tied to a chair. At the whipping post, the same one where so many slaves had been tortured. All the slaves from the plantation were gathered around. 80 people, men, women, children, all silent, watching. Eleanor stood in the middle of the yard, Samuel on her left, Elijah on her right. Silas Tooth, she said, her voice loud and clear. How many slaves' teeth did you pull? Silas spat blood. You gonna kill me, you bitch? Stoop to that level? I'm not going to kill you, she answered. They are. She nodded to the slaves. Slowly, they began to approach. An old man, missing 3 front teeth, approached Silas. He held a large rock. Remember me? He asked. Silas tornet pale. My teeth. You pulled them one by one. Said I smiled at the wrong time. He lifted the rock, dropped it on Silas's knee. The bone broke with an audible crack. Silas screamed, a high-pitched, desperate scream. Now you scream, the old man said. Scream like we used to scream. One by one, the slaves came forward, each with a story, each with a score to settle. A young woman. You pulled my teeth because I called my son beautiful. A middle-aged man. You broke my hand because I grabbed your clothes to keep from falling. A 10-year-old child. You killed my mother. The punishment lasted for hours. Silas was beaten, broken, mutilated. Each blow was accompanied by a memory of an old pain finally avenged. When he died, he no longer looked human, just destroyed flesh and bone. The slaves stood in silence, looking at the body, processing what they had done. "You are free," Eleanor said, her voice echoing across the yard. "All of you. You can go, you can stay, you can do whatever you want, but you are free." No one moved. It was as if they didn't understand the word. "Free?" a voice repeated. "Free," Eleanor confirmed. Mama Bia climbed onto a crate. She looked at everyone. The mistress spoke the truth. "The master is dead, the overseers too. This plantation is yours now, ours." A murmur went through the crowd. Disbelief, hope, fear. "What now?" someone asked. "Now," Eleanor answered. "We decide. Together." They returned to the big house. Clayton was still in the armchair, but he was no longer breathing. His eyes were open, glazed, dead. "He saw everything," Samuel said, "until the very last moment." Eleanor looked at her husband's body. She felt no sadness, no relief, just emptiness. "We need to disappear," Elijah said. "When word gets out, soldiers will come, slave catchers, patrols." "I know," Eleanor replied. "I've already thought of that." She had a plan. Burn the big house, make it look like an accident. Say that Clayton died in the fire along with the overseers. Buy everyone time to escape. "And you, mistress?" Samuel asked. "Are you coming with us?" Eleanor looked around, at the parlor where she had been humiliated so many times, at the armchair where Clayton died, at the walls that had witnessed her transformation. "I am," she said. "I have nothing left here." Mama Bea prepared supplies, food, water, medicinal herbs, everything they would need for the journey. "Where will you go?" she asked. "North," Eleanor replied. "Toward Ohio. There are free communities there, places where we can start over." The old woman hugged Eleanor tightly, like a mother hugs a daughter. "You did the right thing, child. It was painful, but it was right. I killed 3 men, Mama." "No, you brought justice. That's different." At dusk, they set fire to the big house. The flames rose quickly. Dry wood, old furniture, everything became fuel. The slaves watched from a distance. Some cried, others smiled. Some just watched, expressionless. Eleanor stayed until the roof collapsed. She saw the beams fall, the walls crack, 12 years of prison turning to ash. "Ready?" Samuel asked. "Ready." The 3 began to walk, toward the woods, toward freedom. Behind them, the Clayton plantation burned. The smoke rose like an offering to the heavens, or to hell. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was over. The oppression, the fear, the humiliation. Eleanor looked back one last time. She saw the flames dancing, saw the slaves beginning to disperse, each seeking their own path. "I am free," she whispered, testing the words, feeling the taste of them, and for the first time in 12 years, she believed it. 6 months later, in a small hidden community in southern Ohio, Eleanor awoke with the sun on her face. The log cabin was simple, but it was hers, truly hers. Beside her, Samuel and Elijah were still asleep. The 3 had built a life there, along with other fugitives they'd met on the path north. They worked the land. They planted corn, beans, squash. They shared everything equally. Eleanor touched the belly that was beginning to grow. She didn't know if the child was Samuel's or Elijah's, and it didn't matter. It would be the child of all 3. Raised in freedom, a traveler passing through had brought news 2 weeks before, passed along the network. The Clayton plantation had been seized by the state. The slaves had scattered. Many made it to free territories. Others obtained false freedom papers. "And what of me?" Eleanor had asked. "They say the mistress died in the fire with the master," the traveler had said, smiling. "Eleanor Vance is dead. The woman who lives here is just Eleanor." That morning, Eleanor stepped out of the cabin. She looked at the green hills, breathed deep the clean air. Samuel hugged her from behind. "Good morning, my love." Elijah brought fresh coffee. "Today we plant the new field." Eleanor smiled, a true, free smile. "Let's go," she said. "Let's plant our future." And for the first time in her life, she believed that the future could be beautiful.